She convinced me to put everything in her name, said it would be safer that way, more secure for our family. 2 weeks after the last document was signed, she served me divorce papers. Thought she'd won. Thought she'd played me like a fucking fiddle. She was wrong. Let me tell you how my loving wife tried to steal everything I'd built, and how one lawyer's advice about keeping copies saved my entire life. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, the signs were there. But when you love someone for 8 years, when you've built a life together, when you trust them with your kids and your future, you don't expect them to rob you blind. My name is Marcus. I'm 34, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. I'd worked my ass off since college, started with nothing but a computer science degree and a dream. Built a software consulting company from my bedroom to a team of 12 employees. We specialized in inventory management systems for mid-size retailers. Nothing glamorous, but profitable as hell. By the time I was 30, I was pulling in close to $200,000 a year. Good money, real money, the kind that lets you buy a house in a decent neighborhood and start thinking about private schools for your kids. Lisa had been with me since the beginning. We met in university, got married right after graduation. She was studying business administration but never really used her degree. Once I started making serious money, she became a full-time mom to our 2 kids, Emma, 6, and Jake, 4. I loved that arrangement. Traditional maybe, but it worked for us. I handled the business, she handled everything else. Home, kids, social calendar, family planning, perfect partnership, or so I thought. The asset transfer idea came up during one of those late-night conversations couples have when they're planning for the future. Marcus, Lisa said, curled up next to me in bed, I've been thinking about our financial situation. What about it? Everything's in your name. The house, the business, the investment accounts. What happens if something happens to you? I have life insurance, a will, everything set up properly. But what if there's a lawsuit? What if someone sues the business and comes after our personal assets? I'd heard horror stories about that. Small business owners getting sued into bankruptcy, losing their homes because some client claimed damages. The business is incorporated. There's protection. Is there, really? What about personal guarantees? What about that loan you signed for the office space? She was right. I had personally guaranteed several business loans. If something went catastrophically wrong, creditors could come after everything. What are you suggesting? Transfer the assets, put the house in my name, the investment accounts, maybe even part of the business. The idea made sense. Lisa wasn't involved in the day-to-day operations. If someone sued me personally, they couldn't touch assets that belonged to her. I'll look into it, I said, but Lisa was persistent. Over the next few weeks, she brought it up constantly. Did you call that lawyer about the asset protection? Have you thought more about the transfers? Marcus, I'm worried. What if something happens and we lose everything? Her concern seemed genuine, loving, like a wife protecting her family's future. Finally, I called Richard Morrison, a lawyer who specialized in business and estate planning. Asset protection transfers, Richard said during our consultation. Yes, they're common, but Marcus, you need to understand the risks. What risks? Once you transfer assets to your wife, they're hers, legally. If your marriage goes south, she owns everything. My marriage isn't going south. I'm sure it's not. But I have to advise you of the legal reality. What would you recommend? If you're determined to do this, we could set up a trust structure. You transfer assets to a trust with both you and Lisa as beneficiaries. Provides protection but maintains some control. I discussed it with Lisa that night. A trust, she said, frowning. That sounds complicated and expensive. Richard says it's the safest way. Marcus, we're married. We're partners. Why do we need complicated legal structures between us? It's not about trust, it's about protection. From what? From me? The hurt in her voice made my chest tight. Of course not. Then just transfer them to me directly. Simple, clean, no lawyers getting rich off our paranoia. When she put it like that, the trust seemed like overkill. We were married. We loved each other. We were building a life together. You're right, I said. Let's keep it simple. The transfers took 3 months to complete. House deed, investment accounts, half the business shares. Everything moved from my name to Lisa's name. I felt good about it. Responsible. Like I was protecting my family from potential disaster. 2 weeks after the last document was signed, Lisa asked me to move out of the house. The change in Lisa was immediate and brutal. The day after our final bank transfer cleared, she was different, cold, distant, like someone had flipped a switch and turned off 8 years of marriage. Marcus, we need to talk, she said that Friday evening. I just got home from work, ready for our usual weekend routine. Maybe take the kids to the park, grill some burgers, watch a movie. Sure, what's up? Sit down. The tone of her voice made my stomach clench. I'd heard that tone once before when she told me her father had cancer. I think we need some space, she said. Space. I think you should move out, temporarily, just until we figure things out. The room started spinning. Figure what out? Our marriage, whether this is working. Lisa, what the hell are you talking about? Everything's fine. No, Marcus, everything's not fine. It hasn't been fine for a long time. Since when? Since always. You work constantly. You're never present with the kids. You treat me like a housekeeper instead of a partner. Each accusation hit like a physical blow. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time we had a real conversation? When's the last time you asked about my dreams, my goals, what I want from life? You said you wanted to be home with the kids, because you assumed that's what I wanted. You never asked. I felt like I was drowning. Lisa, if you're unhappy, we can work on it. Marriage counseling, date nights, whatever you need. It's too late for that. It's never too late. It is for me. The finality in her voice was terrifying. Are you asking for a divorce? I'm asking you to move out while I figure out what I want. And if I refuse, then I'll file a restraining order. On what grounds? I'll think of something. The threat was clear: leave voluntarily or be forced out by the police. What about the kids? They'll stay with me. You can see them on weekends. Lisa, this is insane. You can't just blow up our family because you're having some kind of midlife crisis. I can do whatever I want, Marcus. In case you forgot, I own this house now. That's when it hit me. The asset transfers, the timing, the sudden personality change. She'd been planning this. How long? I asked. How long what? How long have you been planning this? I don't know what you mean. The asset transfers, getting everything in your name, then kicking me out. How long have you been planning it? You're being paranoid. Am I, or am I finally seeing clearly? Lisa's mask slipped for just a moment. I saw something cold and calculating behind her eyes. You have until Sunday to get your things, she said. I moved into a hotel that weekend, told myself it was temporary, that Lisa was having some kind of breakdown and would come to her senses. Monday morning, a process server found me at my office. Divorce papers, filed 3 days after our conversation. Lisa wasn't having a breakdown. She was executing a plan, and I'd helped her do it by putting everything in her name. The divorce petition was a masterpiece of legal fiction. According to Lisa's version of events, I was an absent, emotionally abusive husband who contributed nothing to the household beyond money. She claimed she'd been the primary caregiver for the children, managing all household responsibilities while I focused solely on my career. She claimed the business success was due largely to her behind-the-scenes support and business advice. She claimed I'd been having an affair with my assistant, Sarah, for over 2 years. She claimed I'd threatened her when she asked for the asset transfers, forcing her to go along with them under duress. All lies, every single word, but lies backed up by the fact that everything was now legally in her name. The asset requests in the divorce filing were breathtaking in their audacity. The house already in her name. All investment accounts already in her name. Half the business already in her name. Spousal support of $8,000 per month. For 5 years, child support of $3,200 per month. All marital debts to remain my responsibility. Her legal fees to be paid by me. She wanted everything. Not just what I'd already transferred to her, but ongoing payments that would drain every penny I made for years to come. And legally, she had a strong position. The assets were in her name. She had primary custody of the kids. She could claim I'd given her everything voluntarily as recognition of her contributions to the marriage. I was fucked, or so I thought. The morning after I got served, I did what any sensible person would do. I called Richard Morrison. Richard, I need help. My wife just filed for divorce and she's trying to take everything. Everything you transferred to her. Everything I transferred to her, plus spousal support, plus child support, plus my future earnings. Jesus Christ, Marcus, I told you this could happen. I know I was an idiot. Can you help me? I'm a business lawyer, not a family lawyer, but I know someone who can help. Helen Chen. She's the best divorce attorney in the city. Expensive, but worth every penny. How expensive? $50,000 retainer, maybe more if it goes to trial. Set up the meeting. Helen Chen's office was like a war room. Law books, case files, whiteboards covered with financial calculations. This was a woman who understood that divorce was business, not emotion. Marcus, she said after reviewing my case, you're in a difficult position, but it's not hopeless. How is it not hopeless? She has everything. She has the assets, but the law isn't just about who holds the title. It's about equity, contribution, and intent. What do you mean? You earned the money, you built the business. You can prove that every asset she now owns came from your labor and your income, but I transferred them voluntarily. Did you, or were you coerced? She convinced me it was for asset protection. That's coercion, fraud even. She misrepresented her intentions to get you to transfer assets. Can we prove that? That depends. Do you have any evidence of her real intentions? I thought about it. Maybe. I kept copies of everything. Bank records, transfer documents, emails about the asset protection plan. Good, what else? She hired a lawyer before she asked me to move out. I saw a business card in her purse. When, 2 weeks before she asked for space, a month before she filed, Helen's eyes lit up. She was planning this before the transfers were complete. It looks that way. That's fraud, clear, actionable fraud. Over the next 2 weeks, we built our case. I provided copies of every financial document from the past 3 years. Bank statements showing that every penny in our accounts came from my business income. Tax returns showing that Lisa had no independent income. Business records proving that I was the sole source of all marital assets. More importantly, I provided evidence of the timeline. Lisa had contacted divorce attorney James Walsh 6 weeks before asking me to move out. 3 weeks before the final asset transfers were complete, Walsh had advised her on the optimal timing for divorce filing. Wait until all transfers were complete, establish separate residence, then file. We had his billing records. Lisa had paid him $15,000 in consultation fees while she was still pretending our marriage was solid. But the smoking gun came from Lisa's own phone records. Helen had subpoenaed them as part of discovery. Buried in hundreds of calls was a pattern that told the whole story. Lisa had been in regular contact with Walsh for 3 months before asking me to move out, sometimes daily calls. Always during business hours when I was at work. She'd also been in contact with a private investigator, a forensic accountant, and a real estate appraiser. While she was asking me to transfer assets for protection, she was building a team to steal them. This is premeditation, Helen said. Clear, documented premeditation. We can prove fraud. What does that mean for the divorce? It means we can get the transfers reversed. It means her claims about emotional abuse and business contributions lose credibility. It means we can fight for custody. What about her claims that I was having an affair? Prove it never happened. Where's your assistant willing to testify? Sarah? Absolutely. She's been with the company for 4 years. Completely professional relationship. Good, we'll depose her. We'll also subpoena your business records, travel records, anything that shows your actual schedule and whereabouts. The case took 8 months to prepare. 8 months of depositions, document production, forensic accounting, and legal briefs. Lisa's team fought every discovery request. They knew that the more information came to light, the weaker their position became. But Helen was relentless. She followed every lead, challenged every claim, and built an airtight case for fraud. The breakthrough came when we found Lisa's internet search history. 3 days before our conversation about asset protection, she had searched for how to divorce wealthy husband, asset protection divorce strategy, can husband take back gifts to wife, prenup after marriage legal, how to prove emotional abuse in divorce. She'd been planning the theft for months. The asset protection conversation wasn't her protecting our family, it was her protecting her theft. The trial started on a cold Tuesday in February. Judge Patricia Williams presiding, a woman with 30 years on the bench and a reputation for seeing through bullshit. Lisa's strategy was predictable: play the victim. She testified that I was emotionally distant, obsessed with work, and dismissive of her contributions to our family. She claimed the asset transfers were my idea, not hers. Said I'd insisted on putting everything in her name as a gesture of trust and commitment. She claimed she'd only asked for space because I'd become increasingly angry and controlling. She claimed the affair with Sarah was an open secret in our social circle. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, tears at the right moments, trembling voice when describing my alleged emotional abuse, dignified silence when confronted with difficult questions, but Helen destroyed her piece by piece. Mrs. Richardson, Helen began Lisa's cross-examination. You testified that the asset transfers were your husband's idea. Yes. But you had already contacted divorce attorney James Walsh 6 weeks before those transfers were complete, correct? I was exploring my options. While encouraging your husband to transfer assets to you. I was confused about our marriage. Confused enough to pay Mr. Walsh $15,000 in consultation fees. I needed legal advice. About what? About my rights. Your rights to assets your husband was about to transfer to you, Lisa's lawyer objected. Judge Williams overruled. Mrs. Richardson, you also contacted a private investigator during this period, correct? I wanted to know if Marcus was having an affair. Did the investigator find any evidence of an affair? Not conclusive evidence. Any evidence at all, some suspicious behavior, such as late nights at the office. Unexplained travel. Mr. Richardson's travel was business-related, correct? You saw the expense reports. Yes, and the late nights corresponded to project deadlines documented in business records, I suppose. So no evidence of an affair, just a successful businessman working hard to support his family. It wasn't just about the affair. What else was it about? He was emotionally distant. Distant enough that you contacted a forensic accountant to value his business assets. Lisa went pale. I don't know what you mean. You paid Thompson and Associates $12,000 to appraise your husband's business, correct? I was trying to understand our financial situation. While planning to divorce him, I wasn't planning anything. Helen pulled out a printed document. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Defense Exhibit 47, Internet search records from Mrs. Richardson's computer. The judge reviewed the document. Admitted. Mrs. Richardson, 3 days before you discussed asset protection with your husband, you searched for how to divorce wealthy husband, correct? I don't remember. An asset protection divorce strategy. I might have. And can husband take back gifts to wife? Lisa's composure finally cracked. I was scared. I didn't know what would happen if our marriage ended. So you manipulated your husband into transferring his assets to you, then filed for divorce. That's not what happened, isn't it? The forensic accountant testified next. Every penny in our marriage had come from my business income. Lisa had contributed nothing financially. Sarah testified about our working relationship. Professional, appropriate, with no personal contact outside business hours. The private investigator Lisa had hired testified that he'd found no evidence of infidelity despite 3 months of surveillance. But the most damaging testimony came from James Walsh, Lisa's own lawyer. Under subpoena, he had to admit that Lisa had contacted him before the asset transfers were complete. That she'd asked specifically about the timing of divorce filings, that she'd paid him substantial fees while still living with me and pretending our marriage was solid. Mr. Walsh, Helen asked, did Mrs. Richardson tell you she was planning to ask her husband to transfer assets to her? I advised her not to discuss her divorce plans with anyone, but she did tell you about the planned transfers. She mentioned that certain assets might be transferred to her name, and you advised her on the legal implications of those transfers. I advised her of her rights under family law, including her rights to assets transferred to her by her husband, among other things. So she was planning the divorce while encouraging the transfers. I can't speak to her motivations, but you can speak to the timing. She was your client for 3 months before filing, approximately, during which time she was still married and living with her husband. Yes, and during which time assets were being transferred to her. I believe so. The case was decided in that moment. Judge Williams had heard enough. Her ruling was swift and decisive. The evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Richardson engaged in fraudulent conduct to obtain marital assets. She manipulated her husband into transferring assets under false pretenses while secretly planning divorce proceedings. The asset transfers are hereby declared void and fraudulent. All assets transferred from Mr. Richardson to Mrs. Richardson within the past year are ordered returned to Mr. Richardson. Furthermore, Mrs. Richardson's claims of emotional abuse and affair allegations are found to be without merit and appear to be fabricated to support her fraudulent scheme. Custody of the minor children shall be joint, with primary residence determined by the children's best interests, not by fraud. Mrs. Richardson's request for spousal support is denied. Her request for attorney fees is denied. Mr. Richardson's request for attorney fees and costs is granted. Lisa lost everything, not just her fraud case, but her credibility, her children's respect, and her future financial security. The house went back to my name. The investment accounts went back to my name. The business shares went back to my name. Lisa was ordered to pay my legal fees $127,000. She appealed, lost. She filed for modification of custody, lost. She tried to get the judge recused for bias, lost. Every legal move she made just dug her hole deeper. 6 months after the trial, I was back in my house with my kids. Lisa had moved into a studio apartment across town and was working as a receptionist at a dental office. The kids stayed with me during the week and visited her on weekends. They were angry with her not because I'd turned them against her, but because they were old enough to understand that she'd tried to steal their home. Why did Mom try to take our house? Emma asked one evening over dinner. She made some bad choices, sweetheart. Is she a bad person? That was the hardest question. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her mother is capable of calculated betrayal? She's not a bad person. She just did some bad things. Will she try to take our house again? No, the judge made sure of that. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage had burned out during the trial, replaced by something colder and clearer. I felt sorry for Lisa. She'd thrown away 8 years of marriage, destroyed her relationship with her children, and ruined her financial future for a scheme that never had a chance of working. But I'd learned something valuable. Love without boundaries is just stupidity wearing a fancy name. I'd trusted Lisa completely, gave her everything she asked for without question, put her name on assets worth over $1 million because she said it would make her feel more secure. Never again. The new financial structure Helen set up was bulletproof. Trust accounts, prenuptial agreements for any future relationships, asset protection that didn't require transferring ownership to anyone. More importantly, I'd learned to distinguish between love and manipulation. Real love doesn't ask you to make yourself vulnerable as proof of your commitment. Real love doesn't demand grand gestures that put your future at risk. Real love doesn't come with strings attached and exit strategies pre-planned. Lisa had never loved me. She'd loved what I could provide. The house, the lifestyle, the financial security. When she realized she could get all of that without me, she tried to take it. But she'd underestimated the legal system and overestimated her own cleverness. The paperwork I'd kept saved my life. The copies Richard had advised me to maintain gave Helen everything she needed to prove fraud. One lawyer's standard advice about documentation had saved me from losing everything I'd worked for. These days, I'm careful about trust. Not cynical, just careful. I still believe in love. I still believe in marriage. I still believe in building a life with someone special. But I also believe in protecting yourself, not because you expect betrayal, but because betrayal is always possible. The woman who shares your bed might not share your values. The person who promises to love you forever might be planning their exit strategy. The mother of your children might be willing to destroy your family for money. I learned that the hard way. Lisa tried to teach me an expensive lesson about trusting blindly. Instead, she taught me an invaluable lesson about protecting intelligently. I kept my family. I kept my assets. I kept my business. Lisa lost everything except her freedom to start over somewhere else with someone who doesn't know her history. Sometimes the good guys win. Sometimes careful documentation beats elaborate fraud. Sometimes the person who tries to steal your life ends up losing their own. The kids are doing well. Emma made honor roll last semester. Jake scored his first soccer goal. They're resilient, like kids always are. Lisa calls them every Tuesday and Thursday, takes them for ice cream on Saturdays. She's trying to rebuild those relationships, and I hope she succeeds. Not for her sake, for theirs, but she'll never get another chance to destroy my life. The legal protections are permanent. The trust has been severed permanently. Some mistakes you only get to make once. Lisa made hers, and I made sure she couldn't make it twice. Trust me on this one. I've got the court records to prove it.